Salutations, friends. My name is Brianna Bond, otherwise known as No Ordinary Scholar, and today we're actually going to be talking about the fight scene, the big major, that pivotal moment in I Hear Colors. If you haven't read the book, shame on you. There's a link down below so you can correct this mistake. But for right now, until the book comes in, because you should go click on the link, order it, get all that working. If you didn't hear about this, there's a link to my Patreon account down below and a link to my Instagram down below. But for right now, you can actually head over to the No Ordinary vlog site. I've changed this name like 8 times. There's going to be a video of me doing my own little performance of this scene. I think I did pretty well, but it's whatever. You can go watch that really quick. While y'all go ahead and look through that, I'll go ahead and talk about this new book that I'm working on. Super excited. Again, a lot of the best details about it are going to be in my Patreon account. Patrons get all of the earliest access to that stuff. Like, most of the information about this series is not going to be coming out until like for another couple months, but patrons already know. But I've got some super crazy shenanigans, in no way associated with Instagrams, going on that website, so you should check it out. You should subscribe, $2 a month, and you can be on top of all the latest news. Then, like, one of these days when I'm like on the news and Ellen's offering me her show because I'm just so awesome, stuff like that, you don't want to be at the bottom of the bandwagon. You want to be at the front of the bandwagon. You want to build the bandwagon. You don't want to have to jump on the last minute. I'm looking out for you here, guys. So we can go ahead and get into the scene. This scene starts off actually with an argument she's having in her own head. She's kind of in denial a bit. She's in denial about the idea that Asher, her best friend, who the main character of the story is Candace Fairchild, and the fight she's having is with her best friend Asher. She's having a fight at first just in her head, trying to convince herself that Asher is actually a good friend and that he does want to be her friend, which is actually throughout the book a fairly regular struggle she has, is trying to convince herself that he's a good friend, that he's not actually using her, that he wants to be her friend and that he cares about her. Why is she so determined to think that he wants to be her friend, that he does care this much? Because he says all of the time, I love you, like my family, like my sister, we're the best friends, we are two peas in the pods, we are unsplittable. He says all of this stuff. Well, when we actually come into this fight, it's a real actions speak louder than words situation. Even though it's a mostly verbal fight, it's in actions in the terms of who he stands by and how he decides to defend himself in this fight. It becomes a real pivotal moment for her. By starting off with just the stuff that's going on in her head, the way she's handling the situation in her head, that shows how she thinks of the relationship and how she treats it. But when we get into the reality, the real fight, that shows what this relationship actually meant to Asher, and then you kind of smack her across the face with it by seeing how different the two things are. Actually brings her out of this mental fight is when she gets home. Prior to this, she had like a full-on breakdown. She hopped out of the tub, just threw her clothes on, so she's just drenched in like soapy water, sweat and stuff. She runs out, she passes out in a baseball field on her campus. She comes home and finds that Asher and his girlfriend are having sex in Candace's bed. So we have Asher, who's pretty darn upset, and it's not just because he didn't get to finish doing what he was doing. It was also because this isn't the first time where he's felt like Candace has barged in on the sanctity or the confines of the relationship. First, they're not necessarily a new couple, but you see earlier on in the book, Asher and Candace are giving each other rides. They'll share car keys, they'll share each other's cars, and you kind of see how Hannah's kind of awkward and uncomfortable with that. And now it's gotten to the point where they are literally in the middle of making love and Candace is stopping him. So now he feels like he's probably going to be put in a position where he's going to have to decide between the two. And that's really an uncomfortable position. On the other hand, you have Candace Fairchild, who is also quite upset. And it's not just because she needs a new bed. She literally gets home. She's crying. She's drenched. It hasn't been raining, so there's a reason to question why she's so goddamn wet. She's having a breakdown, and it just seems like he doesn't care. He is so focused on him, Hannah, and like what was going on there, and focused on being angry at Candace. And you get to the point where she says, Asher, when am I ever just out? In 17 years, when have you ever known me to go out without you? I like this line because in the she is cheer, which is something like you would probably know ahead of time, because anytime there's a game, she would be there. You also see she's discussed with him, like, hey, these are my plans for the day. This is how they would interact ahead of time. The only time she goes out spontaneously in this book is when she's having a breakdown and she's literally fighting, like, the dark, depressed thoughts in her mind. So she has to get out of the house. Those are the only times when she goes out. So you see this contrast here of maybe his understanding of her and the things she does versus her reality. And then towards the end of the scene, you do get an interesting point where, even though up until this point in this entire book, she has been fighting the idea that he is using her. So you see she makes him breakfast on the weekends, give him the answers to the homework assignments when he's out going on dates instead of coming to the study nights she usually has planned. And there's actually a point where he does come over. He doesn't even stay to eat. He comes over literally just long enough for her to make him food. And then he dips and he's like, oh, that's spending time with you. I'll see you later. I have more priorities. So you see her fighting the idea that he is just using her. And then you get to this point where all of these major, like, red flags, she's not okay, are going off. And he's not going to ask about a single one of them. He doesn't care that much. He's far more interested in the fact that she failed to provide him this bed to do the deed in. That's far more important to him than her and her well-being at the moment. And so that drives her to a point where she actually does bring up the fact that she does feel neglected. She does feel abused and used by him. I'm not going to tell you exactly how he's going to respond to that. I'm not going to tell you right now, so you'd have to get the book to find out how this later impacts the book, because there's a decent amount of book. This is not the end of the book. There's a decent amount going on after that, so I would suggest you check out that if you want to learn more. But next, let's go into the flip side of the fight scene. Just kidding. I never had like a cat fight or anything with somebody. There were no like hands being thrown. And in all honesty, because I had an Asher, I had myself an Asher, someone like Asher. And if he had ever asked me if he could have sex in my house, in my bed, I would have said yes. And it would have been a mistake, because this person made me feel really terrible and just genuinely terrible all the time. I felt so lonely because he never really did seem like he wanted to be my friend, and he never really cared about spending time with me. But when there was a time where it felt like I had something that he could use, like homework, or if he was single and just needed some way to kill the time until he got his next girlfriend, that's what I was there for. So I would have said yes at the time, because I was so desperate, because he was all that I had. He was all that I had. I didn't have family. I really didn't have like friends, especially friends that stuck around despite the fact that I was depressed and suicidal and a mess. So I was so desperate to have someone stay and at least pretend that they cared about me. And I was literally in a position where my only options to have that person in my life was either cater to him or cater to basically my Noah of my life. If you want to know more about that, please read the book. So I would have let him have sex in my bed. I would have just felt really terrible and used afterwards. That's kind of the feeling that the scene is driven by. Was there a real life fight scene? Again, no, I wasn't that confrontational with him about it, because again, I was so desperate for that one person to be my support system, for anyone to stay in my support system. I was so scared that if I would confront him, then he would leave. I mean, if he already didn't want to be my friend, and I started not giving him the like easy things that he wanted from me, then why would he stick around? And so what actually did end up happening with that relationship was I write a lot of poems, and that's, especially in high school, that was primarily how I dealt with a lot of my emotions, was I wrote poems and books about it. I was working on publishing The Color Black, which should be propped up over here. It's not. This is The Color Black. I was actually working on publishing this. I used a school project as an excuse to publish this book. So I was working on this, and he came into the room, and he came across some of the not so nice poems I wrote about him in here. He told me, yeah, I knew that I made you feel this way. I could tell. This is actually the reason why I have such trouble now taking genuine tears and equating them with sincerity. After that, literally nothing changed. Nothing ended up happening to make it better. So I decided that it would be best to cut off that friendship, which was an extremely difficult thing for me to do, because again, he was really all that I had. But at the same time, I understand how difficult a position he must have been in. In other situations, it would be just kind of like we drift apart. The thing that makes it really bad is the fact that the receiving end of these situations happened to be a depressed, lonely, suicidal girl. And I recognize that that was probably what made a lot of these situations worse. And I recognize that that probably made a lot of the decisions he had to make extremely difficult, including the decision to just be my friend despite the fact that I really don't think he wanted to. That's why when I do the beta reads for a character like this, I ask, like, what do you think? Was he a good person or was he just in a tough situation? That was one of the questions I asked about Asher in the beta reads. I can't bring myself to call him a bad friend. I can't bring myself to call him a bad person. But at the same time, I would be lying if I said that the idea of ever seeing him again for any period of time, even if it's just a quick hi at a book signing, because hopefully I get that successful one day, or even if I just see him at a reunion, just the idea of ever seeing him again makes me absolutely sick. Thank you guys for listening. I know I'm kind of a wreck, but that's fine because you love me and that's all that matters. If you want to read that scene for yourself, or if you want to read the rest of the book that's around it, I Hear Colors is available for purchase on Amazon.com. Link is going to be down below. It's also The Color Black is available for purchase. That one, these two links will be down below for you guys. I mentioned them earlier, so it wouldn't be weird for me to put them down below. It'll be there. It'll be there. If you want to hear more from me, go ahead and check out my Instagram, Facebook, and NoOrdinaryScholar.com, all of which, again, linked down below. And another link, all of it's down below, surprise, surprise, is going to be to my Patreon account, which essentially acts as like a blog. Patreon's going to be the most updated about all of the things that I'm doing, and it would mean the world to me if you would go ahead and subscribe. You can subscribe for literally as little as like $2, around $2 a month, and it would mean the world to me. It would be super helpful to me. But until next time, Valedictions, friends.